My name is Charles Feldman.
And my name is Ela Edgar. And we're here for another episode of Trust on Purpose. And Charles, do you want to set this one up or do you want me to set this one up?
Why don't you set this one up? That'd be fun.
Okay. Of the many newsletters that I have signed up to, there are a few that I pay a particular attention to. And one of them is Susan David and her work around emotional agility. So a few weeks ago, there was an email that came out, and there was a couple of statements and one bullet in particular that really piqued my interest, so much so that I forwarded it to Charles to say, I think we should talk about this. And so here's the statement. Consider a decision where you prioritized long-term trust over short-term speed. I'm going to say that one more time. Consider a decision where you prioritized long-term trust over short-term speed. And so, of course, we had the conversation before the conversation, and I think this is going to be a really interesting topic. So, Charles, where do you want to start after hearing that statement?
Yeah, and we talked about it before, the conversation, and now listening to it, one of the things that comes up for me is if we think about trust as being willing to risk making something I value vulnerable to another person's actions. So a decision to prioritize trust is a decision to make something vulnerable. And in this case, it sounds like what I'm making vulnerable is I'm choosing to do something that's going to take maybe a little bit longer because I'm actually going to build trust with one or more people to get it done or to along the way, as opposed to trying to get something done quickly and the heck with everybody else. So I'm actually making a choice to make something I value vulnerable, which is maybe getting something done quickly, which may be important to me in whatever my role is.
Now, we didn't talk about this before, but what is coming up for me too in this moment is this doesn't mean that we can't also get things done quickly, because sometimes that's necessary. And that actually having relationships where we have built long-term trust can catapult us into getting things done quickly and efficiently and speedily and all of those, quick words, but that it takes the time and the intentional, the statement says a decision where you prioritize. So we talk about trust being a choice. And so where have we intentionally decided that we're going to invest in a relationship in order to build this long-term trust? There's a couple of angles I think we could go here.
Yeah, the whole notion of prioritizing trust, deciding to prioritize trust, I think is something that often people don't think about. They're just thinking, okay, how can I get this done as quickly as possible with the least bugs or problems or issues or whatever. And the thought of, okay, maybe along the way, I may need to build some trust or want to build trust doesn't factor in. And so what happens is people take action that's focused only on prioritizing speed or prioritizing, whatever else that there might be. They're prioritizing. Reminds me again of something I've said before, a lesson that I didn't really learn at the time, but heard anyway and have taken on since then, which is that in every interaction we have with someone, we can try to accomplish two things. We can further the task towards whatever end we're aiming with that. And at the same time, we can continue to build and strengthen the relationship and trust. And in those interactions, sometimes the priority is a little more on getting the task done sometimes, but there's still a little bit about the relationship building and trust building. Sometimes it's more about trust building, and then the task kind of recedes a little bit. And I think often when something new is started, some new process or program or task or whatever, choosing to build trust first, focus more on trust at the beginning, not all on trust, but more on trust at the beginning, is important. That's what gets us to the point where we have trust that now can allow us at the back end to really speed things up.
I want to say this with so much love and compassion for the many humans on the face of this planet. And reflecting on the many organizations that I've peeked into, the teams that I've worked with, and I think you can say similarly that moving the relationship forward is an afterthought, because so many organizations are like, deliver, 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 produce, 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 meet this goal, meet this outcome, or there's consequences. And so I feel like, oh, this saddens my heart to say it so much. I feel like the relationship part and that trust building part is left on the side of the road. And maybe a few people, because we know that you and I are not the only ones that care deeply about trust. But I feel that there's just so many that it's not where they start, right? It's about how do I get to this goal or outcome or the whatever it is that I need to produce. That's the focus.
Yeah. And I think there's some, I want to just add in here, thinking about Erin Meyer's work on culture, that there are cultures where there's a priority placed on relationship and building, and that's how people interact with each other, is in a relationship. So I think that what you're talking about, what you're referring to, and what I see, of course, in much of my work, it also is North American and to some degree Western European culture. But even among Western European cultures, there's some difference there. So I think really what, in this case, what we're talking to is North American business culture. And you're right, there is this priority around getting it done, getting the work done. Now, yesterday, we figured to stop.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Not yesterday, 2 weeks ago. Why isn't it done? What's the problem? Yeah.
Yes. Right. And so it does get, trust building part of it does get lost. And that's why I think that the people who do think about that. So let me just tell a story. We talked a little bit about this, but tell us one story where I worked with a client some years ago who was head of a department, and their company was undergoing, they were bringing a new software application, company-wide sort of thing on board. The IT department was in charge of that. IT department, in this case, had chosen, for the sake of speed, to basically do everything themselves, make all the decisions about how this new software would be rolled out and how it was going to be used by the end users. My client spent on it complaining to me about how it was really affecting the people in his department and how they were able to do their work. And they were fast losing not only trust, but patience with the impatient people over there in the IT department, to the point where they were actually, some of the people, the end users, were beginning to kind of quietly sabotage. So it had gone from the point where, things were just bad because the new software was not being implemented well. It was being kind of rammed down their throats. But at some point, they started just, okay, this doesn't work, and I'm not going to try and fix it. I'm not going to try and do my part to do anything better, because they had lost complete trust. The relationships that might have been there weren't. To the point where after some period of time, this was affecting not just my client's department, but most departments in the company. The person who was in charge of rolling out this new change software was shown the door because it wasn't working for the company. And they kind of went back to what they had been doing before, because at least everybody knew how to do that and use it. It wasn't efficient, and that's why they were making the change in the first place, but it was a lot more efficient than what was happening with the change. So there's an example of somebody choosing to prioritize speed over trust.
Yeah. As you're sharing that story, I feel like how many change projects focus on the deliverables and the outcome. And we know this. You talk to any change management consultant or expert, that we forget about the human side, right? Or it's given a lower priority. And yet you also have a story where that wasn't left on the wayside. And so what
Yes.
happened as a result?
In that situation, the team that was implementing the new system, in this case, it was a software system mostly, but there was some hardware involved with it. But the person who was in charge of the team that was implementing it, the IT team, chose specifically to go slow at first, to build relationships with the end users who are going to be using the product. And her team actually went out as they began to implement. Well, first, even before they began to implement, they asked all kinds of questions about what those users needed, what they were doing, what they didn't need, proposed what-if scenarios. And they came back and fed that into their plan for implementing this. And they began to implement slowly. And as they did, again, the team went out and sat with the end users and didn't actually talk with them a whole lot at that point, but observed what they were doing, how it was working, where it was working well, and where it was failing. From the end user's perspective, they could just see what they were doing. Brought that back, fine-tuned, changed. So it was a very slow, intentional rollout that built a lot of trust with the end user. So when the end users have problems, they didn't stonewall or sabotage or anything. They called up and said, "Hey, I've got a problem. Can you help?" Which is, of course, what you want, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So this change was, took a while, but the net result was that it actually took. And what the company ended up with was a new system that worked much better than the old system and that people were comfortable using. And along with that, there was a strong relationship between the IT department, particularly this team, but the IT department in general, and the people in the rest of the company, who kind of saw them as, at the end of the day, as real heroes, even though it took longer. The top leadership of the company was annoyed, was upset that it was taking so long. But in the end, it was worth it because trust had been built at that level between the team that was implementing and the people who were going to be using this, which helped in many, many ways as they tried to do other things going forward.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think I've heard so many stories about failed software implementations because even after the implementation, the users are back to the old system or looking for workarounds because they haven't been seen as human in the change. And so
hold up that heart again a little bit. Let's make sure that people get it there, because now we've got the visual.
Now we have the visual. And so we think about, and I can't tell a particular story, but I'm sure we've got many examples to draw from where we've worked with clients or seen a team that has really struggled because at the end of the day, the implementation has failed because the bulk of the users are not adapting and are not adopting the new technology. You've done this to me. I'm not going to buy in. You can't make me do this. All of those words, energies, behaviors. And so what happens then instead, when we do put intention, and I'm choosing to build relationship and trust along the way, not just force this on you. I'm not shoving this down your throat. Yes. We're in this together. Oh, you've got a problem. Oh my gosh, we didn't think of that. Let me watch how you do that so I can help mitigate how we can fix that.
Yeah.
right?
Exactly. That's the kind of process that tends to, 9 times out of 10, end up, it's a little slower, but it ends up with what people really need. It solves the problem so that people can do the work more efficiently and effectively than they could with the old system.
Yeah.
And again, it's that choice to take the time, make the effort to pay attention to both the task, which is important, and the relationship and trust side of the relationship.
And I think as we're talking about this, I also want to be very explicit that this doesn't necessarily add enormous amounts of time to the project or the deliverable, right? So yes, it does take more time, but we're not, it doesn't become a 6 months project when it could have been a 3-month project, right? It does take intention along the way and that relationship building, but it doesn't have to mean an inordinate amount of time.
Yeah. I mean, I'm thinking back to when we first started our podcast. We were, we knew each other a little bit, but we weren't exactly, we didn't know each other a whole lot. We didn't know a lot about each other. We didn't, So our first podcast, we kind of jumped into it, but at the same time, along the way, we spent a lot of time, before each podcast, we spent a lot of time talking.
Yeah.
And not just about the topic of the podcast, but just getting to know each other. And we still do that, but it's now because we do know each other and we want to, we're kind of, and we stay close in each other's lives. But yeah, there was that time when we first started that we spent a lot of time just getting to know each other and learning who each other was and developing trust. So that when I said something really stupid, I could trust you could cover for me. Thank you.
Or when we bump into technology glitches, you're like, it's okay, Ela. We're gonna figure it out. You can show me some grace and compassion. Yeah. Gosh, we love our technology bumps. Yeah. I also wanted to tell a little story about something that happened last week, and I think it really highlights, again, this choosing the long-term trust over a short-term deliverable. And so I had the opportunity of sitting on a panel and listening to students from Royal Roads University deliver their capstone projects. And there was one student in particular, she had an actual product that she was putting out to market. And as she was going through her deck and her presentation, I was really struck by how she had really tried and tested a number of different iterations of her product and what she did as a result. So she had this idea, she sourced all of her materials, and she put a product out to a test market. And by listening, asking for feedback and listening to the feedback, she realized that that particular way that she had launched the product was a fail. And so she didn't give up. She tried again. And in that feedback, she said, I think this is the iteration that I want to do instead. And so she created a little bit different of a product, went out to a test audience again. And I want to go back to how bold and courageous it is to ask for feedback and then to actually listen. So she listened, asked for that feedback, listened, and realized that this was also a fail. Now, 2 failed products can be, I think, discouraging, and also look at the richness of what she's learning about what potential clients want. And so taking the time to slow down and do that, she's now at a place where she's really finalized or gotten clear on what is actually going to work for the audience that she's gearing her product to. And so she could have just created a product and gone out to market. And I'm sure she would have had some success. I think this way she's building not only loyalty, but such deep trust because her clients and potential clients really feel that she cares and she listens. And I was really struck by that and really proud of her for taking that extra time in developing her product. And I think it's going to have an incredible impact on her business when she actually launches.
Yeah, there's another good example of choosing to prioritize trust, building trust over short-term advantage, quick turnaround.
And being committed to, I know the answer, I know what's right, I've figured this out, and so now I'm going to push it out into the world. Versus, I have an idea, I think it's pretty cool, I think there's legs to it, and I'm going to solicit that feedback and that input and really listen to it before I run out the door launching some kind of product or service.
Which, of course, makes me think about teams that I've worked with, and they're sitting around thinking about, for example, a new product. And there's the teams that they're all about, hey, let's get this out the door. What do we need to do to just get it out the door? And there are teams that sit around and say, how's this product going to be used? What do we see? Actually soliciting from each other ideas, thoughts, and listening in the context of the trust that the team members have in each other, particularly in care and the psychological safety that the strong trust in each other's care builds, so that when one team member says, I think there's a problem here and I think we really need to look at it, even though that's going to slow the whole thing down, they're willing to speak that, and it is listened to. I mean, maybe they choose to move on, but they choose to move on after reflecting, or maybe they choose to stop and take a second or third look at this situation. But in any case, having built the trust, that team, so that each person can play their role and say what they think, is how teams end up going much faster, and which accounts for, I think, a great deal of what you see in successful teams that get things done seemingly more quickly than other teams, because what they come out with is built on combined input of everybody on the team. So they use everybody's resources, not just one or two people.
You're reminding me also of the time to actually figure out what is the problem that we're trying to solve. And that also takes time and that trust in the relationship. And so it's easy to, here's the problem and here's the solution. Let's go. We've got this figured out. We don't need to do all that focus group stuff. We don't need to have conversations with stakeholders. We know what it is. Let's fix it. And actually, on top of uncovering the actual problem that we're trying to solve, we're also building trust because we're taking the time to listen. We're taking the time to ask, to solicit that input, not just from, our key people, but from people maybe we don't hear their voices often.
Yeah. And as you were talking, I was also thinking about the International Coach Federation has its core competencies. And one of the core competencies is trust building and setting the foundation for the relationship. And that comes first and early on, but it continues throughout the whole coaching relationship or engagement that you have with the other person. If, as coaches, we don't take time to build trust and continue to build it and maintain it, nothing happens. No coaching actually happens. Whereas if we do take the time to build trust, then our clients are willing to go deep, not for our sakes, although they feel comfortable with us, they're doing it for their own sake. But if they don't feel comfortable with us, they won't do that for their own sake. And so the whole coaching enterprise falls apart. So again, taking that time, choosing to spend time up front building trust as a coach, with an individual, with a team, as a leader with their team members and their peers and the senior leadership and whoever else is important to build trust with. Yeah.
It's reminding me, and of course I don't have it at my fingertips, where it's a quote that you use in your book about trust being in the eye of the beholder.
Oh, yes.
So we could, maybe you can help me not butcher it. We can think that we are trustworthy and that our behaviors are building trust, but we really need to ask and solicit that feedback. Or, this is a new relationship and building trust is really important to me. What does that look like for you? How can I make sure that I'm behaving in a way that I'm building trust versus damaging it? And what might I do that would cause a trust breakdown or a trust wiggle? And so making sure that I'm also clear on what that might be so that I can avoid that behavior. Yeah. This group of entrepreneurs I was with last week, it was quite interesting because I love hearing their feedback after they learn about your framework. And one in particular was like, I realize how unreliable I am. And that, taking on and adding to my capacity actually causes reliability breakdowns because there's no way I can deliver on all of these things. And so, one thing is I'm going to be more accountable and more committed to what I say yes to. And so I think there's an invitation here to our lovely listeners is, how do you want to be more intentional about building trust in the relationships with your peers, your coworkers, and anyone in your life that's important to you? How do you want to add the time and be intentional about building that stronger trust?
Yeah, it is a choice.
And also, what am I choosing not to do? Because I'm like, there's one relationship that's like just popped in my head. It was like, hey, Ela, poke, remember this one where I think it's time for a check-in conversation. Like, how are we doing in our relationship? We haven't had an intentional trust conversation for a while. And in this particular relationship, it's not you. It sounds like I'm talking to you, but I'm not talking to you. But yeah, I think this conversation is reminding me that there's some relationships that I need to pay attention to and just do a check-in because I care. Yeah. Because I don't want to let that trust just, slide by the wayside, that it matters to me, that it remains strong and something that we can keep building on.
Yes. Which kind of brings us back to Susan David's statement, choosing to prioritize. Well, do you want to read it again just because?
Yeah. Consider a decision where you prioritized long-term trust over short-term speed.
Yeah. And back to this notion that in the beginning of a relationship and all the way through the relationship, there are those choice points again and again and again to prioritize trust, which doesn't mean we have to give up speed. And in fact, the stronger the trust, the faster we can go. And Stephen Covey's book, and the title of it says a lot, the speed of trust. Trust allows us to go fast when we have it, when it's strong. And we still have to keep checking in. We have to maintain it. It doesn't just maintain itself.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not a check one and done. It's a regular check-in and a taking care of the relationship.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you. This has been a good conversation, and one in which I'm going to think about those relationships where I might need to do a check-in, and also think about where I might have been prioritizing speed over building trust, or vice versa, and actually thinking about building trust first. So this is great. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Charles.
On behalf of both Charles and myself, we want to say a big thank you to our producer and sound editor, Chad Penner, Hillary Rideout of Inside Out Branding, who does our promotion, our amazing graphics, and marketing for us. And our theme music was composed by Jonas Smith. If you have any questions or comments for us about the podcast, if you have a trust-related situation that you'd like us to take up in one of our episodes, we'd love to hear from you at trust@trustonpurpose.org.
And we'd also like to thank you, our listeners. Take care and keep building trust on purpose. Until next time.
Until next time.